Hello everyone, and welcome to the first episode of Reach into History. I am your host George, and today I will be talking about the events of the Second Boer War. Whilst it is in fact the Second Boer War, the conflict is commonly referred to as the Boer War, since the First Boer War, which occurred between December 1880 and March 1881, was a much smaller conflict. Boer, which means farmer, is the common term for Afrikaans-speaking white South Africans who descended from the original settlers of the Dutch East India Company at the Cape of Good Hope. The origins of the war stemmed from more than a century of conflict between the Boers and Britain and were therefore extremely complex. Probably the most important factor, however, was who would control and benefit from the Witwatersrand gold mines. British expansion caused the Boers to begin what was known as the Great Trek, which meant that they journeyed northwards away from the Cape Colony into South Africa's eastern interior. There, they established two independent Boer republics, the South African Republic, or Transvaal Republic, and the Orange Free State. Britain recognised the two Boer republics in 1852 and 1854, but attempted annexation of the Transvaal in 1877, which led to the First Boer War in 1880 to 1881. After Britain suffered defeats, the independence of the two republics was restored, subject to certain conditions. Relations, however, remained uneasy. In 1866, diamonds were discovered at Kimberley, prompting a diamond rush and a massive influx of foreigners to the borders of the Orange Free State. Then, in 1886, gold was discovered in the Witwatersrand area of the South African Republic. Gold made the Transvaal the richest nation in southern Africa. However, the country had neither the manpower nor the industrial base to develop the resource on its own. As a result, the Transvaal reluctantly allowed foreigners, many of whom were British men. However, this led to the number of foreigners in the Transvaal exceeding the number of Boers, which caused confrontations between the two groups. Britain's expansionist ideas, as well as disputes over the political and economic rights of the foreigners residing in the Transvaal, resulted in the failed Jameson Raid of 1895. Dr. Jameson, who led the raid, intended to encourage an uprising of the foreigners in Johannesburg. However, they did not take up arms in support, and Transvaal government forces surrounded the column and captured Jameson's men before they could reach Johannesburg. As tensions escalated, negotiations attempted to reach compromise on the rights of the foreigners within the South African Republic, control of the mining industry, and Britain's desire to bring the Transvaal and Orange Free State under British control. Given the British origins of the majority of foreigners in the Transvaal and the growth of new foreigners into Johannesburg, the Boers recognised that granting full voting rights would eventually result in the loss of ethnic Boer control in the South African Republic. In June 1899, negotiations failed, and in September 1899, British Colonial Secretary Joseph Chamberlain demanded full voting rights and representation for the foreigners residing in the Transvaal. Paul Kruger, the President of the South African Republic, issued an ultimatum on 9th of October 1899, giving the British government 48 hours to withdraw all their troops from the borders of both the Transvaal and the Orange Free State, failing which the Transvaal, allied to the Orange Free State, would declare war on the British government. The British government rejected the South African Republic's ultimatum, resulting in the South African Republic and Orange Free State declaring war on Britain. War was declared on the 11th of October 1899 with a Boer offensive into the British-held Natal and Cape Colony areas. The Boers had about 33,000 soldiers and outnumbered the British, who had only 13,000 troops on the front line. The Boers had no problems with mobilisation, since they had no regular army units apart from the state's artillery of both republics. It rapidly became clear that the Boer forces presented the British with a tactical challenge. The Boers had a mobile and innovative approach to warfare, drawing on their experiences from the First Boer War. The Boers struck first on 12th October at the Battle of Crapan, an attack that came before the invasion of the Cape Colony and Colony of Natal between October 1899 and January 1900. With the element of surprise and speed on their side, the Boer drove quickly towards the British garrisons at Ladysmith, Mafeking, and Kimberley. The quick Boer mobilisation resulted in early military successes against scattered British forces. Sir George Stuart White, commanding the British division at Ladysmith, allowed Major General Penn Simons to throw a brigade forward to the coal mining town of Dundee, which was surrounded by hills. This became the first engagement of the war, the Battle of Talana Hill. Boer guns began shelling the camp from Talana Hill on the 20th of October. Penn Simons immediately counterattacked, driving the Boers from the hill, but losing 446 British men, including Penn Simons himself. The British government took these defeats badly, and therefore sent 2 more divisions as well as large numbers of colonial volunteers. By January 1900, this would become the largest force Britain had ever sent overseas, amounting to 180,000 men, with further reinforcements wanted. After a succession of defeats, the Boers realised that against such overwhelming numbers they had little chance of victory, and so became demoralised. British troops advanced into the Orange Free State from the west and captured Bloemfontein, the capital, unopposed on the 13th of March, with the Boer defenders escaping and scattering. Meanwhile, they detached a small force to relieve Baden-Powell. The relief of Mafeking on 18th of May 1900 provoked riotous celebrations in Britain. On the 28th of May, the Orange Free State was annexed and renamed the Orange River Colony. After being forced to delay at Bloemfontein and at Paardeberg, the British finally resumed their advance. They were again forced to halt at Kroonstad for 10 days, but finally captured Johannesburg on the 31st of May and the capital of the Transvaal, Pretoria, on the 5th of June. By September 1900, the British were nominally in control of both republics, with the exception of the northern part of Transvaal. However, they soon discovered that they only controlled the territory their army physically occupied. Despite their losses, the Boer commanders adopted guerrilla warfare tactics, primarily conducting raids against railways, resource and supply targets, all aimed at disrupting the operational capacity of the British Army. This meant that casualties were generally light, and this tactic was rather successful and meant that the British had to revise their tactics. The British concentrated on restricting the freedom of movement of the Boer commandos and depriving them of their local support. The railway lines had provided vital lines of communication and supply, and they had used armoured trains and had established fortified blockhouses at key points as the British had advanced across South Africa. They now built additional blockhouses and fortified these to protect supply routes against Boer raiders. Some 8,000 such blockhouses were built across the 2 South African republics. Each blockhouse cost between £800 and £1,000 and took around 3 months to build. They proved very effective, as not one bridge where a blockhouse was sighted and manned was blown. The British also implemented the scorched earth policy. This meant targeting everything within the controlled areas that could help the Boer guerrillas with a view to making it harder for the Boers to survive. As British troops swept the countryside, they systematically destroyed crops, burned homesteads and farms, and put Boer and African men, women, children and workers in concentration camps. The camps had originally been set up by the British Army as refuge camps to provide refuge for civilian families who were forced to abandon their homes for whatever war-related reason. However, when new tactics were introduced in an attempt to break the guerrilla campaign, the influx of civilians grew dramatically as a result. Disease and starvation killed thousands. Of the 28,000 Boer men captured as prisoners of war, 25,630 were sent overseas and were either freed or enslaved within civil societies. The vast majority of Boers remaining in the camp were women and children, of which over 27,000 perished. The British offered terms of peace on various occasions, notably in March 1901, but were rejected by the commandos. They pledged to fight until the bitter end. Their reasons included hatred of the British, loyalty to their dead comrades, solidarity with fellow commandos, an intense desire for independence, religious arguments, and fear of captivity or punishment. On the other hand, their women and children were dying every day, and independence seemed impossible. The last of the Boers surrendered in May 1902, and the war ended with the Treaty of Vereeniging, signed on 31st of May 1902. The British had won and offered generous terms to regain the support of the Boers. The Boers were given £3 million for reconstruction and were promised eventual limited self-government, which was granted in 1906 and 1907. The treaty ended the existence of the South African Republic and the Orange Free State as independent Boer republics and placed them within the British Empire. The Union of South Africa was established as a dominion of the British Empire in 1910. Thank you everybody for watching. I hope that you enjoyed. Make sure to subscribe if you want to see more content and leave a comment telling me what you'd like to see next time. Also, don't forget to check out my Twitter page at @reach_history for video updates and more. I hope to see you again soon.